Hi, I'm Helen, Pure Yoga. I'm here to take you through Surya Namaskara, Sun Salutation A. It's the honouring of the sun and the gratitude for the sun. So saluting the sun and giving that sun the respect for the soul and the source of life that it gives us. So Surya means Hindu god of sun and Namas means to bow. So basically we bow to that sun. In a normal practice of yoga, we tend to use Namaste. Namas means bow and Te means to you. So I bow to you. So in sun salutations, we are building strength and flexibility. So we're flexing and extending the front and back of the body as we move through a flow of sequences. So these sequences are done breath to movement. We try and do it with the Ujjayi breath, which is in and out through the nose, slight restriction in the back of the throat, so it's an audible sound for you. And that Ujjayi breath helps build up some heat in the body. So using that Ujjayi breath is sometimes a little bit impossible if you're holding a cold or allergy, in which case use the mouth, but just make sure you breathe constantly and don't hold your breath. So if you think of, as you inhale, you feel your body growing and lifting and extending, and as you exhale, you feel your body curling in, flexing and holding the body deep. So your exhale is where you take the flexion. So they're generally where we take the breaths, but sometimes that does change. So a little idea of where you can take your breaths, but it doesn't always mean that that's guaranteed. So I'm going to show you the different ways of getting in and out of the poses, the transitions, just to make it easier, or give you the full expression to make sure you're doing it into its full expression. So I'm going to be giving you some regressions. So we start always with our sun salutation in Tadasana, which is mountain pose. The feet are hip width apart, or the big toes can be together and the heels apart. You lift the toes, you bring the big toe down, the little toe down, and all the toes in the middle, and you feel those toes in the floor. You feel the ball of the foot, the heel of the foot. You try not to let yourself rock out onto the outside edges or the inside edges. Try and find that space in between. You think about this back. So quite often people have a lot of deep arch in that lower spine, which quite often means they haven't got a lot of support in their abdominals at the front. So my thought to you is try and tuck that tailbone down slightly, draw the pubic bone towards the ribs, try and tether the ribs and hips towards each other, just to take a little bit of arch out of that lower back so you're not pivoting in one point. And this will keep that core center nice and strong. So that, if you're in a real arch, is lordosis of the spine, but try and find some neutrality. Then we think about the thoracic spine, which is in between the shoulder blades and the ribs. Quite often, if you work at the desk a lot, you're quite rounded shoulders. If you're quite tall and you've been trying to hide that for years, quite often you curl the shoulders to try and make yourself smaller. But the aim is to try and stretch those pectoral muscles at the front of the chest and contract those rhomboid muscles in between the shoulder blades. And then try and draw the shoulder blades down towards the hips. So it takes that kyphosis out of that thoracic spine. And we try and lengthen up so we've got a nice tall spine from the base all the way up to the crown of the head. And maybe in this place you find that stability. Tadasana means mountain pose. So as we think of mountains, they're strong, they're stable, they're grounded. And that's what we're trying to find in this pose with the body. So the physical element of yoga is strength and flexibility. The mental part of yoga is finding that breath to movement, which brings it quite meditative. You close the eyes, take a moment in mountain pose, just to find some gratitude for that sun. If you're practicing in the morning, you face to the east, so you do the sun salutation as the sun rises. If you're doing it in the evening, try and face to the west, so you have that gratitude as that sun goes down and that sun sets. So just take a moment in Tadasana. So I'm going to give you options through first, and then we'll flow you through the Surya Namaskara in regression and the Surya Namaskara into its full capability. So soften the knees slightly, hold it in Tadasana. Then as you take a breath in, you raise those hands up towards the ceiling. Now you can take it into a back bend here, but quite often, especially if you're over flexible, you can end up dumping into that lower back. So try and keep that tailbone tucked down, the ribs and hips tethered, the lift through the chest, but not the flare through the ribs. Taking it up into Urdhva Hastasana. Then as you breathe out, if you're regressing it, you bend the knees, you pivot from the hips, you bring the hands down to wherever they reach. If the knees are bent, you can maybe bring those hands to the floor. If you're taking it down in the full expression, you keep those legs straight and you point the crown down towards the floor. So even if you're bent knees, the crown points down. It may be that your hands are nowhere near the floor and they're on the ankles or maybe the shins. Taking it into Uttanasana, forward fold. And you just hold here for a breath, and then your next breath in, you bring it up into Ardha Uttanasana. So either come up onto the fingertips if the legs are straight, or come up onto the shins, but try and straighten the legs regardless here. So a nice flat back as you lift up into that half fold. And then you bring the hands back to the floor. So you have a choice here to either bend the knees and step your right foot back, step your left foot back to plank, Phalakasana. So that's an option to get back here. If you're taking the other option, which is the full expression, after your half lift, you plant the hands, you bend the knees, you jump back to Chaturanga Dandasana, which is low plank. So there are your two options. What I don't suggest you do is jump back to plank, because that can be too impacting on the shoulders and the elbows and the wrists. But if you've got bent arms in Chaturanga, that takes that pressure out of that arm. So again, you either step back to plank, or after your half lift, you jump back to Chaturanga. So from Chaturanga or plank, if you're in plank, you can either drop the knees, turn the creases of the elbows and release down to the mat, or you can bring your chin, keeping the hips high and your chest to the floor, and then roll through to your baby cobra. Or you can come down with a straight body all the way to the floor, still turning the creases of the elbows, grazing the ribs with the elbows and release to the mat. If you're already in Chaturanga and you've jumped back and you've landed here, you will roll over the toes to lift up the chest into Urdhva Mukha Shavasana, upward facing dog. If you've come down either with the knees, either with the chin and chest hips high and roll through, you'll come to baby cobra, or you can come up into that Urdhva Mukha Shavasana by pushing into the hands and lifting the chest. Thighs can either stay away, thighs can either be on the floor, or you can lift those thighs away. Roll the shoulders back, push those hips down. So whichever transition you've come through with, if you're up in your Urdhva Mukha Shavasana, if you're going back chest to thighs, you release the chest back to the floor, you tuck the toes under, bring the chest back towards the thighs, you push into those hands and feet as you lift back up into Ardha Mukha Shavasana, downward facing dog. If you've come through Chaturanga and you're in upward facing dog with the thighs away, remember the toes are always untucked here, tops of the feet flat. You'll lift through the hips, so you engage the center muscles of the body to roll over the toes with straight legs, lifting the hips back to your Ardha Mukha Shavasana. So remember, those options can be your breath in comes to a little baby cobra, then you release the chest down, tuck under the toes, bring the chest back to the thighs, push into the hands, lift the hips, down dog. Or as I said, if you've come with me and we're in upward facing dog, we don't bring our chest back down, we just roll over the toes, lift the hips with straight legs back to down dog. So you'd hold it in downward facing dog for 5 breaths. After you've taken your 5 breaths, whatever foot you step back with, if you're stepping forward, you keep the hips high, you bring the right knee into the chest, you come onto the toes of the back foot as you step your right foot through. You then bring your left foot to meet your right, half lift into that Ardha Uttanasana, and then fold into Uttanasana, letting the crown of the head point down to the floor. So it's either straight legs or bent knees here, And then you bring the hands back up to the ceiling and then hands back to the chest to Samasthiti He. If you're in down dog and you want to jump to that forward fold, when you've taken your 5 down breaths in down dog, you take a bend into the knees, gaze into the hands, and as you breathe in, you jump forward to a half lift. As you breathe out, you fold over the legs, point the crown down, and then with straight legs, pivoting from the hips, bring the hands up to the ceiling, bring the palms back together at the chest. So that Ujjayi breath will help you engage breath to movement. It's that slight audible sound. If you're not using that inhale and exhale through the nose, then feel free just to use the mouth. Just try and find those breaths wherever you can. So the key to the whole of this is trying to find some core engagement. And the best way to find core engagement is to feel like you're lifting that pelvic floor. So when you go to the toilet, if you try to stop yourself going to the toilet, you sort of put like a pressure on the pelvic floor, as though you're lifting that pelvic floor up. And that will give you some real good support. It helps draw the belly back to support that center. So it then switches on your oblique muscles, it switches on your abdominis rectus muscles and the transverse muscles. As you bring your knee in to step forward, you're working with that psoas muscle to bring the knee into the chest to step it through. So when you're stepping the foot through, if you're doing that version, quite often in our flow classes, we raise the leg up. So we create momentum quite often to throw the leg through. But with this, we're not lifting the leg. So you have to really use muscle engagement to bring that foot through. So you bring the knee into the chest, you gaze in between the hands, you lift onto the toes of the back foot, keep the hips high, and then plant the foot forward. If that's a bit of a struggle for you, you can always help it through with the hand on the same side as the foot you're bringing through first. Then you step the other foot to meet. So I'm going to do the first option of Surya Namaskara so that I can take you through it without me particularly cueing anything. So I'll do it in silence and then I'll do it again, cueing where the breaths come. So think about that pelvic floor as you're flowing through the practice, that slight lift of the pelvic floor as if you're stopping yourself going to the toilet. Think of the Ujjayi breath to connect that body and breath and movement together. And really think about the core center being switched on when you're moving and transitioning through these poses. So front of the mat, lift all 10 toes, ground them down, turn the palms forward, take a moment maybe with the eyes closed, feeling how stable that body feels, feeling the grounding of the feet into the mat. So from this point, I'm just going to flow through the easy option. Take a long deep breath in, long breath out. Try and listen to where my breaths are coming. So you take 5 breaths in down dog. When you've taken your 5 breaths, your next breath in. So you'll probably notice there where I was taking my inhales and exhales. So your transition back to plank is an exhale. Your transition back to down dog is an exhale. Now, whether you bring chest to thighs, it's still one long exhale to get back to down dog. So that's the one way of doing it with step back. I'll do that again, just with a different option of releasing to the floor. I'll do it in a slightly easier regression. And I will cue the breaths this time as I take you through that. So find Tadasana, find the grounding in the feet, turn the palms forward. Have that gratitude for the sun at the beginning. Then as you breathe in, raise the hands up towards the ceiling. Try not to flare the ribs. As you breathe out, fold from the hips, bend the knees, bring the hands down to the floor or the shins and let the head bow towards the floor. Your next breath in, straighten the legs, bring the hands onto the shins or come up onto the fingertips. Then your breath out transitions back, stepping your left foot, then your right foot back to down to plank and release to the floor. Now remember that release to the floor can be dropping the knees. Your next in-breath, we lift up either baby cobra or an up dog. And your out-breath releases the chest back down, chest back to thighs, lifting the hips back to down dog. One long out-breath there. Then you take your 5 breaths in down dog. Now remembering about that momentum of the leg, we don't use it, we use muscle strength. So your next in-breath brings the knee into the chest and steps the left foot through, toes of the back foot, step the right foot to meet the left on a half lift on that inhale. As you exhale, release that head down, crown pointing to the floor. Remember, bend the knees if you do. Your next breath in, raise those hands back up towards the ceiling, and your breath out brings us back to Samastiti. All the time I've thought about that pelvic floor lift. I've thought about that Ujjayi breath connection, that slight audible sound in the back of the throat. So I'm going to take you through the harder option, the full expression of Surya Namaskara, and it will be jump back and jump through. So remember, you only jump back if you feel safe. So if your jump back is this and your bum drops, you haven't got that core strength to jump back. So therefore, step back to plank. If you've got that core strength to hold when you jump back so the hips don't drop to the floor, then by all means use this chaturanga jump back. But remember to stay nice and strong in the shoulders. Make sure the elbows bend as you jump back to that chaturanga place. Find that tadasana, that grounding. Turn the palms. Take that out, slight arch out of that lower back. Try and lift through the chest without flaring the ribs. Your next, in fact, I'm not going to cue you from here. I'm just going to let you hear the sound of my breath through the microphone. Then I'd take the 5 breaths here. After your 5th exhale, you take a breath in. So I'll go again, trying to cue the breath. Breath in, raise the hands up towards the ceiling. Breath out, fold from the hips, straight legs, bring the hands to the floor, crown towards the mat. Breath in, half lift. Then as you take your out breath, bend the knees, plant the hands, jump back, chaturanga, strong core. Breath in, roll over the toes, lift up the chest into your upward facing dog. And your breath out, roll over the toes, back to down dog. You take your 5 breaths there. Then your next in-breath, remember, connect that pelvic floor, lift that base of the root of the spine. Take a bend in the knees, step or jump to a half lift. And then as you breathe out, forward fold over those legs. Let the crown of the head point down. Breath in, lift those hands back up towards the ceiling, palms come together. Breath out, bring the hands to the chest. So you could do that as many times as you wish to really warm that body up. Remember that Ujjayi breath is the internal warmth of the body created by that breath. The pelvic floor stabilizes that center of the body. So always feel like you're lifting that pelvic floor as you flow through the practice. Remember that the things that you shouldn't do is not to jump back to plank. It will jolt the arms and the shoulders, which can cause injuries through your joints. If you're jumping back, make sure the elbows get bent and they graze the ribs and you hold them nice and tight. When you're releasing to the floor from if you're doing plank, always think about the turn of the crease of the elbows before you release down. So remember, like I did in my vinyasa video, you turn what we call the eye of the elbow forward, and then that allows those elbows to come into the body. If it's not turned forward, it takes the elbows out to the side, which then becomes a gym plank. So try and keep the creases of the elbows forward when you lower. They will automatically go into that place when you do jump back to chaturangas. But remember, if chaturanga isn't already within your practice, then take the step back to plank. If you feel that those hips drop first rather than the shoulders and you've got no support in the center, don't bother with those chaturanga jump backs. Try and build up to that. So remember, if those jump backs look like this, as you take your breath in and then you plant your hands and you jump back and that middle collapses, you can imagine how much that impacts that lower spine. So that jump back has to be well supported. The breath in, think about engaging that pelvic floor. The breath out, plant the hands, jump back, bend elbows, and the center of the body stays stable. Then you can roll up and lift the chest. If you're taking the thighs away, it puts a little bit more pressure into the shoulders, but push into the tops of the feet as well. Squeeze the bum, engage the thighs, and then keep that engagement as you lift up to your downward facing dog. So when you're engaging the core center isn't just about the belly. We think about that space between the hamstrings and the glutes, squeezing the outside of the hips, so the glute medius. We're squeezing the belly. We're trying to tether the ribs. We're keeping strong in that latissimus dorsi, which is the muscle that stretches up the back. We're trying to hold the spine muscles nice and firm, the erector spina muscles. In the shoulders, the deltoid muscles, biceps, triceps, so everything's switching on. So it's a real muscle engagement. So if you have any questions, just pop some questions in the comments box and I'll get back to you regarding any questions. But remember, this Surya Namaskara is all about a salutation to the sun. It's about a respect for that sun that is the soul and source of life. So doing sun salutations morning or evening, make sure you're facing the way the sun sets in the morning and sun rises in the morning and way the sun sets in the evening. So you can do that as many times as you wish. It will build up strength and stamina. It will build up flexibility. It will help with your extension and flexion of the spine. It will help strengthen your shoulders. It will help strengthen and stabilize your hips. It will help stabilize your core center. So a full body workout, but it's also that meditative movement, breath to movement. It allows you to switch inwardly, switch off from the outside world. So I hope you enjoy learning this Surya Namaskara with me. Like I say, any questions, post them in the comment box. But in the meantime, have a great day. Have peace in your thoughts, your words, your hearts. From my heart to yours. Namaste.